The steam whistle cut through the evening air like a knife through butter, and Olivia Jenkins felt her heart splinter as she gripped the worn leather handle of her carpet bag, stepping onto the platform of the last eastbound train from Virginia City, Nevada. It was June 1878, and the silver mining town that had promised her father fortune had delivered only his grave. 3 months she had spent in this dusty, desperate place, watching consumption steal the breath from his lungs one painful gasp at a time. Now, with nothing but $47 sewn into the lining of her traveling coat and a heart heavy enough to anchor a riverboat, she was heading back to Philadelphia, back to the boarding house where her aunt would take her in with thin-lipped disapproval and endless reminders of poor choices. The conductor called final boarding, his voice echoing off the false-fronted buildings that lined the main street. Olivia climbed the metal steps, her black morning dress gathering the dust that seemed to coat everything in this God-forsaken territory. She found a seat by the window, pressing her gloved hand against the glass as if she could somehow leave an imprint of her sorrow on this place. She did not know that James Everett was running. He had been at the Silver Dollar Saloon, nursing his third whiskey and listening to old Tom Crawford complain about the latest cave-in at the Afar mine, when young Billy Mason burst through the swinging doors with news that stopped James's heart mid-beat. That Eastern lady, the one whose father died last month, she is getting on the train right now, leaving for good. James had not even realized he was moving until his boots hit the boardwalk outside. He ran like the devil himself was on his heels, his spurs jangling with each pounding step, his hat flying off somewhere near the assayer's office. He did not stop to retrieve it. For 3 months, he had watched Olivia Jenkins from a respectful distance. He had seen her sitting vigil outside her father's rented room above the general store, her face pale in the lamplight, her shoulders straight despite the weight she carried. He had watched her walk to the doctor's office every morning, then to the pharmacy, then back again, her steps measured and determined even as hope faded from her eyes. He had wanted to speak to her, had rehearsed 1,000 opening lines, but what did a rough cowboy say to a lady like that? A woman educated back east, whose dresses, though travel-worn, had been tailored by hands that understood fashion. A woman whose father had been a gentleman investor, not a man who broke horses and mended fences for $30 a month. But now she was leaving, and if he did not speak now, he would spend the rest of his life wondering what might have been. The train was already moving when he reached the platform, its wheels beginning their slow revolution, steam hissing from the engine like an angry beast. James did not hesitate. He ran alongside the moving train, his long legs eating up the platform, and jumped. His boots hit the rear platform of the last passenger car hard enough to send a shock up through his spine. He grabbed the railing, breathing hard, his shirt soaked with sweat despite the cooling evening air. The conductor appeared in the doorway, his face red with indignation. "You cannot just jump on a moving train. Where is your ticket?" James pulled out his wallet, extracting bills with shaking hands. "How much to the next stop?" $3 to Reno. He handed over the money without argument, though it represented nearly 2 weeks of work. The conductor counted the bills, shook his head at the madness of young men, and waved him inside. The passenger car was barely half full. A family with 3 small children occupied the front seats. 2 miners who had clearly struck it rich, judging by their new suits and gold watch chains, were playing cards at a table. And there, 5 rows back, sitting alone by the window with her dark hair pinned up in a style that was already coming loose, was Olivia Jenkins. James walked down the aisle on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. His mouth was dry, his heart hammering so hard he was certain everyone in the car could hear it. She had not seen him yet. Her face was turned toward the window, watching Virginia City recede into the distance, and even in profile he could see the tears tracking down her cheeks. He stopped beside her seat. "Miss Jenkins." She startled, turning to face him with wide eyes that were the color of aged whiskey, amber and gold and brown all at once. Recognition flickered across her features, followed by confusion. "Mr. Everett." Her voice was soft, cultured, with the rounded vowels of Philadelphia still intact despite her months in the West. "What are you doing here?" He realized he was still breathing hard from his run. He pulled off his gloves, tucked them in his belt, and met her eyes. "Do not leave without hearing this." The train swayed beneath them, picking up speed as it left the town behind. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if James had been capable of noticing anything except the woman in front of him. "I do not understand," Olivia said. She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, embarrassed to be caught crying. Hearing what? Now that he had her attention, James found the words he had rehearsed deserting him entirely. He stood there like a fool, hat in hand, except his hat was somewhere back on C Street, staring at her while the seconds ticked past. "May I sit?" he finally managed. She glanced around the car, clearly aware of the impropriety, but then nodded. What did it matter now? She was leaving this place forever, leaving behind the grave she had dug with her own grief, the dreams that had died with her father. Let the gossips talk. James sat across from her, their knees almost touching in the narrow space. He leaned forward, elbows on his thighs, and tried to find the right words. "I know you do not know me well," he began. "We have only spoken a handful of times, when I helped you carry those medical supplies from the pharmacy, when you asked directions to the telegraph office. But Miss Jenkins, I have to tell you that those few conversations were the brightest moments in my days." Olivia's lips parted in surprise. "Mr. Everett, please, let me finish. I jumped on a moving train and I might have broken my neck doing it, so please let me say what I came to say." A smile ghosted across her face, so brief he might have imagined it. She nodded. "I am not a rich man," James continued. "I work for the Triple Bar Ranch, breaking horses and driving cattle. I live in a bunkhouse with 5 other men, and everything I own fits in a trunk at the foot of my bed. I am not educated like your father was. I can read and write and do sums, but I never went past 8th grade. I have no prospects beyond hoping the ranch keeps me on, and maybe someday I can save enough to buy a small spread of my own." He paused, watching her face. She was listening intently, her handkerchief clutched in her hands. "But I am honest," he said. "I do not drink to excess or gamble away my wages. I do not run from hard work or responsibility. And Miss Jenkins, from the moment I first saw you, helping your father down from the stagecoach with such gentleness and care, I have not been able to get you out of my mind." "Mr. Everett," Olivia said softly, "I am going home, back to Philadelphia. There is nothing left for me here. I know. I know you have to go. Your father passed, and you have family back east, and this territory has brought you nothing but pain." He reached across the space between them, not quite touching her, his hand hovering near hers. "But I could not let you leave without telling you that you were seen. That your strength these past months, the way you cared for your father with such devotion, the way you held your head high even when the town busybodies whispered about you walking the streets alone, all of that was noticed. You were noticed. By me." Tears were flowing freely down Olivia's face now. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have been a coward for 3 months, too afraid of rejection to speak to you properly. Because I let fear hold me back from at least trying to know you better. And because I could not live with myself if I let you disappear thinking that nobody in this hard country cared whether you stayed or left. The train rattled over a rough section of track, and James had to grip the seat to steady himself. One of the children in the front started crying, and the mother's soothing voice floated back to them. Outside the window, the landscape was turning dark, the mountains becoming silhouettes against the dying light. "You do not even know me," Olivia whispered. "Then tell me." James finally let his hand close over hers. Her fingers were small and cold, even through her gloves. "We have until Reno. Tell me about yourself. Let me know you. And if, when we arrive, you still want to continue east, I will help you with your bags and wish you well. And I will return to Virginia City and spend the rest of my life knowing I at least tried." Olivia looked down at their joined hands. Everything in her sensible, practical mind told her this was madness. This man was virtually a stranger. She had a ticket all the way through to Philadelphia, where her aunt was expecting her, where she could resume the quiet, careful life of a spinster teacher or companion that had been her destiny before her father's wild dream of silver riches had pulled them west. But when she looked up into James Everett's face, she saw something that made her hesitate. His eyes were the clear blue of a mountain lake, and they looked at her with an intensity that made her feel, for the first time in months, truly alive. "I am 22 years old," she began slowly. "I was born in Philadelphia in 1856. My mother died when I was 7, and it was just my father and me after that. He was a clerk in a shipping office, a good man but a dreamer. He always believed the next venture would make our fortune." James listened without interrupting, his thumb moving in small circles over her knuckles. When he heard about the silver strikes in Nevada, he could not be dissuaded. "He sold everything we had, our little house, my mother's jewelry, all of it. He was so certain." Her voice caught. "He was so certain this was finally it, the opportunity that would change our lives." "I am sorry," James said. "I am so sorry it ended the way it did." The altitude affected him badly from the start. He could not catch his breath, could not sleep. Then he developed a cough, and it just got worse and worse. Olivia pulled her hand away to wipe her eyes. "The doctors said it was consumption, that the dry air might help, but it did not. Nothing helped. I watched him waste away for 3 months, and there was nothing I could do." "You stayed with him, you cared for him. That was everything." "I feel so lost," she admitted. "My whole life I have been someone's daughter, someone who had a place and a purpose. Now I am going back east with almost no money, no prospects, to live on my aunt's charity. She will take me in, but she will never let me forget that I am a burden." James leaned back, considering. What would you do if you could do anything? If money was not an issue, if you had no obligations, what would your life look like? It was such an unexpected question that Olivia actually laughed, a small, surprised sound. "No one has ever asked me that." "Well, I am asking now." She thought about it, really thought about it. The train rocked gently beneath them, the rhythm almost soothing. "I would teach," she said finally. "I always loved learning, and I am good at explaining things. Before we came west, I was working as a governess for a family with 3 children. I loved that work, seeing them learn, watching their faces light up when they understood something new." "Virginia City is starting a proper school," James said. "They just hired a teacher last month, but the town is growing so fast they are already talking about needing another one." "I cannot go back there," Olivia said quickly. "It is too full of sad memories." "What about somewhere else then?" "Somewhere in Nevada. Somewhere you could make new memories." He could see her wavering, and he pressed his advantage. "Miss Jenkins, Olivia, if I may be so bold, do not let one tragedy make you turn your back on the whole West. Yes, it can be hard and cruel, but it can also be beautiful." It is a place where people can start over, where what you were before matters less than what you choose to become. You make it sound so simple. It is not simple at all. It is probably the hardest thing I will ever ask anyone to do. He reached for her hand again. I am asking you to take a chance on a place that hurt you. I am asking you to take a chance on a man you barely know. I am asking you to trust that sometimes good things can grow even in rocky soil. Olivia searched his face, looking for deception or ulterior motives, but she saw only earnest hope. What exactly are you asking, Mr. Everett? James. Please call me James. What are you asking, James? He took a deep breath. I am asking you to get off the train with me in Reno. I am asking you to give me a month to court you properly. To show you that there is more to Nevada than loss and sadness. If at the end of that month you still want to go back east, I will personally escort you to the train station and buy your ticket myself. A month, she repeated. 4 weeks. That is all I am asking for. 4 weeks to show you that what I feel is real, and to see if maybe, just maybe, you might come to feel something too. This is madness, Olivia said, but she did not pull her hand away. Perhaps. But is it any more mad than going back to a life that makes you unhappy? At least this way you will know. You will not spend the rest of your life wondering. The conductor made his way down the aisle, announcing that they would be pulling into Reno in 20 minutes. The family with children began gathering their belongings. The miners finished their card game and settled their bets. Olivia and James sat in silence, still holding hands across the narrow space between seats. She could hear her father's voice in her head, his eternal optimism, his belief that fortune was always just around the next corner. That optimism had led them to Nevada and ultimately to his death. Should she not have learned to be more cautious, more practical? But there was another voice too, quieter but insistent. It was her own voice, the one she usually ignored, the one that wondered if a careful, cautious life was really living at all. I have nowhere to stay in Reno, she said finally. I used nearly all my remaining money for the train ticket. James's face lit up. Are you saying yes? I am saying I need somewhere to stay if I am even considering this insane proposition. There is a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She is respectable, charges fair rates, and does not tolerate any impropriety. I can pay for your room for the month. Absolutely not. I will not be kept by a man I barely know. It is not keeping you. It is an investment in the possibility of us. But if it makes you uncomfortable, call it a loan. You can pay me back when you get a teaching position. You are very sure of yourself. I am not sure of anything except that I will regret it for the rest of my life if I do not try. He squeezed her hand gently. What do you say, Olivia Jenkins? Will you give me 4 weeks? The train whistle blew, announcing their approach to Reno. The lights of the city were visible in the distance, a constellation of yellow flames against the dark desert. Olivia thought about Philadelphia, about her aunt's narrow house and narrower expectations. She thought about her father, about his dreams that had turned to dust. But she also thought about how it felt to have someone look at her the way James Everett was looking at her now, as if she were something precious and rare. She thought about how it felt to be seen. 4 weeks, she said, but I am making no promises beyond that. The smile that spread across James's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. 4 weeks is all I am asking for. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for giving us a chance. They disembarked in Reno together, James carrying her carpet bag and leading her through streets that were just as dusty and chaotic as Virginia City, but somehow less oppressive. Perhaps it was the company, or perhaps it was the possibility hanging in the air between them like the smell of rain on a hot day. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a tidy 2-story structure with a painted sign and clean curtains in the windows. The widow herself was a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She looked James and Olivia up and down, clearly assessing the situation. "I need a room for Miss Jenkins," James said. "She is a respectable lady recently bereaved, 4 weeks to start." "Where is your chaperone, miss?" Mrs. Patterson asked Olivia directly. "My father passed away in Virginia City. I have no other family in Nevada. And this gentleman—" Olivia hesitated, unsure how to explain their situation. James stepped in smoothly. "I am a friend hoping to become more. But Miss Jenkins will need a proper place to stay while we see if courtship might be possible. I give you my word, Mrs. Patterson, that nothing improper will occur. I am simply asking you to provide a safe, respectable place for her to lodge." Mrs. Patterson studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. "I have a room on the second floor, faces the street. $1 a day includes breakfast and supper. No male visitors above the first floor, no exceptions." "That is acceptable," Olivia said, finding her voice. She reached for her bag, but James held it away. "I will bring it up after Mrs. Patterson shows you the room, and before you argue, this does not count as impropriety. It is just good manners." Mrs. Patterson actually cracked a smile at that. "You can leave it in the hall outside her door, young man. Come along, miss. Let us get you settled." Olivia followed the widow upstairs, leaving James in the small sitting room near the entrance. Her legs felt unsteady, and she was not sure if it was from the train ride or from the enormity of what she had just agreed to. 4 weeks in a strange city with a man she barely knew, pinning her hopes on the possibility of something she could not even name. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a single chair by the window. Olivia set down her reticule and looked out at the street below. She could see James leaving the boarding house, his tall figure distinctive even in the dark. He looked up, and even though she was certain he could not see her clearly, she lifted her hand in a small wave. He waved back, then headed off into the night, presumably to find his own lodgings. "You are taking a risk with that one," Mrs. Patterson said from the doorway. "I know. But he has an honest face, and he did not try to bully me or sweet-talk his way around my rules. Those are good signs." The widow smiled. "Get some rest, miss. Things always look clearer in the morning." After she left, Olivia unpacked her meager belongings, hanging up her 2 dresses and laying out her nightgown. She washed her face and hands in the basin, braided her hair, and climbed into bed. The sheets smelled of lye soap and sunshine, and the mattress, while not luxurious, was comfortable enough. She had thought she would lie awake for hours, her mind spinning with doubts and what-ifs. But exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, she forgot where she was, and panic fluttered in her chest. Then memory returned, and with it, a strange sense of anticipation. She dressed in her gray day dress, the one that was not full mourning but was still subdued enough to be respectful. She pinned up her hair, wishing she had a better mirror, and made her way downstairs. The dining room held a long table where 5 other boarders were already eating breakfast. Mrs. Patterson pointed Olivia to an empty seat and brought her a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast, along with a cup of strong coffee. "Your gentleman caller left a message," Mrs. Patterson said, handing her a folded piece of paper. "It was slipped under the door this morning." Olivia unfolded the note. The handwriting was surprisingly neat and steady. "Miss Jenkins, I hope you slept well. I will call for you at 10 o'clock if that is acceptable. I thought we might walk through town and I could show you some of what Reno has to offer. Respectfully, James Everett." She glanced at the clock on the mantel. It was 9:30. She had just enough time to finish breakfast and make herself presentable. At exactly 10 o'clock, there was a knock on the front door. Mrs. Patterson answered it, and Olivia heard James's voice in the hall. She took a moment to steady her nerves, then walked out to meet him. He had cleaned up considerably since last night. His hair was freshly washed and combed, his shirt was pressed, and he was wearing a different pair of trousers that did not have trail dust ground into the knees. He held his hat in his hands and smiled when he saw her. "Good morning, Miss Jenkins. You look lovely." "Good morning, Mr. Everett. Thank you for the note. James, please. And may I call you Olivia at least when we are not in company?" She nodded. "That would be acceptable." They set out into the morning sunshine, walking side by side with a proper distance between them. Reno was smaller than Virginia City, but it had a more settled feeling. There were actual trees along some of the streets, and the buildings were not all false fronts. The Truckee River ran through the center of town, its water bright and clear. James pointed out the landmarks as they walked. The courthouse, the bank, the several churches, the theater where traveling shows sometimes performed. They stopped at a bakery, and he bought them each a sweet roll which they ate sitting on a bench near the river. "Tell me about your work," Olivia said. "You mentioned breaking horses." "Yes. The Triple Bar Ranch runs cattle, but they also buy wild horses and train them for sale. I have always had a way with horses since I was a boy. My father was a farrier, and I grew up around them." He tore off a piece of the sweet roll and tossed it to a bird that was watching them hopefully. "It is hard work, sometimes dangerous, but I love it. There is nothing quite like earning the trust of an animal that has known nothing but freedom. Is it not cruel, though, taking their freedom away? It can be, if it is done badly. But a good trainer does not break a horse's spirit, he just channels it. A well-trained horse can still be bold and strong, but he trusts his rider enough to work together. It is a partnership, not a conquest." Olivia considered this. "That is a kind way of looking at it. It is the only way that makes sense to me." He turned to face her. "Olivia, I want to be clear about something. These 4 weeks are not about me trying to trick you or manipulate you into staying. They are about letting you see who I really am and about me getting to know who you really are. If, at the end, you decide we do not suit, I will accept that. But I want this to be real between us. Honest." "I appreciate that," she said. "I have to admit, I woke up this morning wondering if I had dreamed the whole thing. It all seemed so improbable. I ran alongside a moving train and jumped onto it. I am still not entirely sure how I did not break my fool neck." He grinned. "So yes, improbable is a good word for it." They spent the rest of the morning walking and talking. James told her about growing up in Sacramento, about his parents who had passed away within a year of each other when he was 19, about drifting east into Nevada looking for work, and finding his place at the Triple Bar Ranch. Olivia told him about Philadelphia, about her quiet childhood after her mother's death, about the governess position she had loved. She found herself telling him things she had not shared with anyone, like how she had resented her father for dragging her west, and how guilty that resentment made her feel now that he was gone. "It is possible to love someone and still be angry with them," James said. "And it is possible to be angry and still grieve. Those feelings do not cancel each other out. Have you lost people? My parents, like I said, and a good friend in a cattle drive accident 3 years ago. He was trying to free a steer that had gotten tangled in brush, and it kicked him in the head. He died instantly." James's voice was quiet. "I was angry at him for a long time afterward. Angry that he had taken such a stupid risk, angry that he had left me. It felt wrong to be angry at someone who was dead, but I could not help it." "How did you make peace with it?" "Time, mostly. and realizing that being angry did not mean I loved him any less. It just meant I missed him and wished things had been different. They found a small restaurant for lunch, where they ate beef stew and fresh bread. Olivia insisted on paying for her own meal from her dwindling funds, and James reluctantly agreed. Afterward, they walked back toward the boarding house. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow evening?" James asked as they stood on the front steps. "There is a place here that serves the best roast chicken in the territory, or so they claim." "I would like that," Olivia said. "Thank you for today, James. It was nice. Normal. Normal is good. I will take normal." He tipped his hat to her. "Until tomorrow, then." Olivia watched him walk away, then went inside. Mrs. Patterson was in the sitting room mending a tablecloth. "He seems like a good one," the widow said without looking up. "I hope so," Olivia replied. "I am trusting that he is. Trust is never a bad place to start." The next 3 weeks unfolded in a rhythm that became increasingly comfortable. James called on Olivia every day, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon. They took walks, shared meals, and talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams of owning a small ranch someday, maybe running a horse training business. She told him about the books she had read, the places she had always wanted to see. He took her to a local ranch where a family friend worked, and she watched him work with a young horse, speaking to it in low, calm tones, moving with a patience and gentleness that surprised her. The horse, which had been wild and skittish, gradually relaxed under his touch. "You are good at that," she said afterward. "It is just about understanding what they need. Horses are not so different from people in that way. They want to feel safe. They want to trust that you are not going to hurt them." She took him to the small library in town and showed him her favorite kinds of books, novels by Dickens and the Bronte sisters. He admitted he had never read much fiction, mostly just newspapers and instruction manuals. "Would you read to me sometime?" he asked. "I would like to understand what you love about these stories." So she did. On the porch of the boarding house, with Mrs. Patterson sitting nearby as a chaperone, Olivia read aloud from Jane Eyre while James listened with genuine interest. She loved watching his face as he reacted to the story, his indignation at Mr. Rochester's deception, his satisfaction when Jane claimed her independence. "She is strong," he said when Olivia closed the book for the evening. "That is what makes her lovable. Not that she needs Rochester, but that she chooses him." "Exactly," Olivia said, pleased that he understood. "It is about choice, not necessity." As the days passed, Olivia found herself thinking less about Philadelphia and more about the life that might be possible here. James introduced her to the principal of Reno's small school, a harried man named Mr. Wilkins, who was desperately trying to manage 40 students in a single room. When he learned Olivia had teaching experience, his eyes lit up. "We have been trying to get funding for a second teacher," he said. "If you are serious about staying in the area, I could almost certainly secure you a position by the fall term." The possibility planted itself in Olivia's mind like a seed. A real job, a purpose, a reason to stay that was not just about James. Though it was getting harder to separate the two things, the appeal of staying in Reno and the appeal of James himself. He kissed her for the first time on the 18th day. They had been walking by the river at sunset, the water turning gold and pink in the fading light. He had taken her hand, which had become customary between them, and they had been laughing about something. Olivia could not even remember what, when suddenly he had stopped walking and turned to face her. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "I have been wanting to for days, but I wanted to ask properly." Her heart had stuttered in her chest. "Yes," she whispered. He cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough with calluses but gentle. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet, a question and an answer all at once. She rose up on her toes to meet him, her hands finding the front of his shirt. And for a moment, the whole world narrowed down to just the two of them and the connection sparking between them. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you, Olivia Jenkins. I thought you should know." "I think I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "It terrifies me. It terrifies me as well, but in the best possible way." They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, and Olivia felt as if she were floating. Mrs. Patterson took one look at them and smiled knowingly, but she said nothing. That night, Olivia sat by her window and wrote a letter to her aunt in Philadelphia. She explained that she would not be returning, that she had found a teaching position in Reno, and that there was a man she was courting. She kept the details sparse, knowing her aunt would disapprove no matter what she said, but it felt important to at least inform her of the decision. When the 4 weeks were up, James took Olivia on a picnic up in the hills above town. He borrowed a horse and wagon, and they rode out in the early morning, a basket of food from Mrs. Patterson tucked under the seat. They found a spot under a stand of cottonwood trees with a view of the valley below, and James spread out a blanket while Olivia unpacked cold chicken, cheese, bread, and apples. They ate slowly, savoring the food and the warm June sunshine. When they finished, James lay back on the blanket, his hands behind his head, and looked up at the sky through the leaves. "Our 4 weeks are up," he said. "I know. Are you going to get on a train back east?" Olivia lay down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "No. I am going to accept the teaching position Mr. Wilkins offered me. I am going to stay in Reno." He turned his head to look at her. "Because of the job or because of me?" "Both. The job gives me purpose and independence, but you," she reached out to trace the line of his jaw, "you give me hope. You make me believe that good things are still possible." James rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow so he could see her face properly. "Olivia, I want to marry you. Not right away if you are not ready, but I want you to know that is where my heart is heading. I want to build a life with you. I want to save up enough for that ranch I have been dreaming about, and I want you there with me. I want to see you teaching children and watch you make a home in this wild country. I want everything with you." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, but they were happy tears. "Yes. Yes to marrying me eventually, or yes to all of it. Yes to all of it. Yes to building a life together. Yes to the future." She pulled him down to kiss her. "Yes, James Everett, my answer is yes." They stayed on that hillside until the sun was high overhead, talking about their future, making plans that felt both thrilling and terrifying in their realness. They would court for another 6 months to be proper about it. James would save every penny he could toward a down payment on land. Olivia would start teaching in the fall and begin building her own savings. Then, in January of 1879, they would marry. When they finally drove back to town, Olivia felt as though her entire world had shifted on its axis. A month ago, she had been leaving Nevada with a broken heart, convinced that this territory had taken everything from her. Now she was staying, and it was not just about James, though he was a large part of it. It was about choosing to believe that loss and sorrow did not have to be the end of the story. It was about choosing to stay and fight for happiness instead of running away from pain. The next months unfolded with a sweet steadiness. Olivia moved into a small rented room closer to the school when the fall term started, wanting to be independent even as she and James continued their courtship. She threw herself into teaching, and she found that she loved it even more than she had as a governess. The children were rough around the edges, many of them from mining families or ranches, but they were eager to learn. She was especially good with the girls, encouraging them to dream bigger than just becoming wives and mothers, though she told them those were honorable callings too. James visited every Sunday, which was her day off. Sometimes they went to church together, sitting in the back pew and listening to the preacher talk about grace and redemption. Sometimes they simply walked by the river or sat on Mrs. Patterson's porch, talking about their weeks. He told her about the horses he was training, about the cattle drives, about the other men at the ranch. She told him about her students, about the lessons she was planning, about the small triumphs and frustrations of teaching. They became a known couple in Reno, the tall cowboy and the pretty schoolteacher. People nodded to them on the street, and shopkeepers greeted them by name. Olivia felt herself becoming part of the community in a way she had never been in Virginia City, where she had been defined entirely by being the dying man's daughter. In October, James came to visit with news. The ranch owner, Mr. Harrison, was getting older and wanted to sell off some parcels of land to his most trusted workers. There was a piece about 10 miles outside of Reno, 200 acres with a creek running through it, that was perfect for starting a small horse ranch. The price was more than fair, and Mr. Harrison was willing to hold a note for part of it if James could come up with a down payment. "I have saved about half of what I need," James told Olivia. "If I can save the same amount again by January, I can make it work. It would mean we would be starting married life in debt, but it would be our land, Olivia. A real foundation for a future." "How much do you still need?" He told her the figure, and she did some quick math in her head. She had been saving her teacher's salary carefully, living frugally. Between her savings and his, they could just about manage it. "We could combine our funds," she said. "If we are going to marry anyway, why not start building now? I could not ask you to do that. What if something happens to me? You would have nothing. And if I keep my savings separate and something happens to me, the money goes to my aunt, who will probably spend it on a new hat." "No, James, we are in this together. Let us act like it." So they did. They went to the bank together and made the arrangements. Mr. Harrison drew up the papers, and by November, James Everett owned 200 acres of Nevada rangeland with a creek and enough grass to support a small herd. There was a line shack on the property, barely more than a cabin with one room, but it had a good roof and a working stove. James spent his Sundays that fall fixing up the cabin, and Olivia joined him when she could. They patched the roof, replaced the broken window, and scrubbed the place from top to bottom. She made curtains from fabric she bought in town, and he built a better bed frame. It was not much, but it was theirs. In December, James gave Olivia a ring. It was a simple gold band with a small chip of turquoise set in it, nothing fancy, but it fit her perfectly and she loved it. "It is not a diamond," he said apologetically, "but the turquoise came from Nevada. I thought it was fitting." "It is perfect," she told him, and she meant it. They were married on January 12, 1879, in the small Methodist church in Reno. The ceremony was simple, attended by Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Wilkins, some of James's friends from the ranch, and a few of Olivia's fellow teachers. Olivia wore a new dress in deep blue, and James wore his best suit. They stood before the preacher and promised to love and honor each other all their days. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed her with such tenderness that several people in attendance actually sighed. Then they walked out into the January sunshine, hand in hand, ready to begin their new life together. They spent their wedding night in the boarding house in Olivia's old room, which Mrs. Patterson had decorated with flowers, and a cake she had baked herself. It was not glamorous, but it was sweet and fitting. They held each other in the narrow bed, marveling at the fact that they were finally, truly together. "I still cannot believe you jumped on that train," Olivia murmured against his chest. "What if I had said no? What if I had told you to leave me alone? Then I would have gotten off at Reno, bought a ticket back to Virginia City, and spent the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had just kept my mouth shut." He kissed the top of her head. "But you did not say no. You gave me 4 weeks, and those 4 weeks turned into the rest of our lives. Do you regret it? We are starting with so little. We have each other, we have land, we have dreams. That is more than most people get, Olivia. I regret nothing." In the spring, they moved into the cabin on their land. It was rough going at first. The cabin was cramped for 2 people, and there was so much work to be done. James continued working at the Triple Bar Ranch to bring in steady money while he built up their own small herd. Olivia kept teaching through the end of the school year, riding out from town on a mare James had trained specifically for her. She fell in love with the land despite its harshness. She loved the way the sagebrush smelled after a rain, the way the creek sang over its stones, the enormous sky that seemed to go on forever. She learned to cook over a wood stove, to churn butter, to tend a garden in the rocky soil. James built her a chicken coop, and she raised hens for eggs. Slowly, they were carving out a life. In June, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told James one evening after supper, watching nervously for his reaction. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Are you happy?" she asked. "I am terrified," he admitted. "But yes, I am happy. So happy I can barely find the words." The pregnancy was not easy. The summer heat was oppressive and morning sickness lasted well into the afternoon. But Olivia was young and strong, and she had James's unwavering support. He hired a woman from town to help with the heavy chores, and he doted on Olivia in a way that made her laugh even as it touched her heart. Their son was born in March of 1880, a healthy baby with James's blue eyes and Olivia's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after James's father. Holding that tiny, squalling infant in her arms, Olivia felt a sense of completeness she had not known was possible. "He is perfect," James said, staring down at his son with wonder. "Absolutely perfect." "We made him," Olivia said. "This little person is half you and half me and all his own. It is amazing." Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious toddler who followed his father everywhere, chattering in his own incomprehensible language. James taught him about horses, letting him sit on the gentle mare while James led her around the corral. Olivia read to him every night, the same books she had read to James in those early days of courtship. In 1882, their daughter was born. They named her Clara, and she was tiny and fierce from the start. Where Thomas was easygoing and patient, Clara demanded attention and had opinions about everything. Olivia loved them both with a ferocity that sometimes frightened her. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. James's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and people came from all over the region to buy his animals. He hired a young man named Peter to help with the work, and Olivia took in sewing and mending to add to their income. Money was never plentiful, but they always had enough. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, James and Olivia would sit on the porch he had built and watch the sun set over the mountains. Sometimes they talked about their days, about the children, about the future. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, grateful for the life they had built together. "Do you ever think about that train?" Olivia asked one evening in the summer of 1885. Thomas was 8 now, Clara was 3, and there was another baby on the way. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not jumped on?" "Every day," James said. "Not because I regret my choice, but because I am so grateful I made it. That one moment of courage changed everything. It changed everything for me too. I was so lost, so convinced that the West had nothing to offer me except pain. And then you appeared, breathless and desperate, asking me not to leave without hearing what you had to say." She squeezed his hand. You gave me a reason to stay. More than that, you gave me a reason to hope." "We gave each other that," James said. "I was going through the motions before I met you, Olivia, working and eating and sleeping but not really living. You woke me up. You made me want to dream bigger." Their third child, a son they named William, was born that October. He was the calmest of the three, content to simply observe the world around him. As he grew, he showed a gift for gentling animals that rivaled even his father's talent. The years flowed past like the creek that ran through their property, sometimes rushing and sometimes gentle, but always moving forward. They expanded the house, adding 2 more rooms and a proper kitchen. James built Olivia a small structure she used as a schoolroom, and she tutored children from neighboring ranches, passing on her love of learning to another generation. They weathered droughts and hard winters, a fire that destroyed one of the barns, illnesses and injuries, and all the challenges that came with frontier life. But they weathered them together, and that made all the difference. In 1890, when Thomas was 10, Clara was 8, and William was 5, Olivia realized she was pregnant again. She was 34 now, and this pregnancy was harder than the others. The baby, another daughter they named Margaret, was born premature and weak. For 3 terrifying weeks, they were not sure if she would survive. James barely slept during that time, taking shifts with Olivia to watch over the tiny infant, willing her to keep breathing. The other children tiptoed around the house, aware that something was seriously wrong. And then, slowly, Margaret began to gain weight and strength. Her cries grew louder, her grip stronger. She would survive. "You scared us, little one," James whispered to her one night, holding her against his chest while she slept. "Do not do that to your old father again." Olivia, watching from the bed where she was recovering, felt tears slip down her cheeks. "We are so lucky, James. Every single day we are so lucky." "I know," he said. "Believe me, I know." Margaret grew into a delicate, thoughtful child who loved books as much as her mother did. She was the scholar of the family, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. Olivia knew that this daughter would probably not stay on a ranch forever, that her curiosity would lead her to bigger places. But that was fine. They would raise their children to follow their own paths, whatever those might be. In 1895, James was thrown from a particularly stubborn horse and broke his leg badly. The doctor had to set it twice, and James was laid up for months. It was a difficult time financially, as they relied so heavily on his work. But Thomas, now 15, stepped up to help run the ranch with Peter. Olivia took on more tutoring students, and they made it through as they always had. "I am not as young as I used to be," James said ruefully, watching his leg heal with frustrating slowness. "Getting bucked off used to be part of a day's work. Now it is a catastrophe." "You are only 39, Olivia said. "Hardly ancient. Tell that to my leg." But he healed, and though he walked with a slight limp afterward, he was soon back at work. He was more careful now, less willing to take risks, more likely to let Thomas handle the difficult horses. It was hard for him to step back, but it was also good. Thomas was turning into a fine horseman in his own right, with his father's patience and his mother's quick mind. Clara, at 13, announced that she wanted to be a doctor. It was an outrageous ambition for a girl from a small Nevada ranch, but Olivia and James took her seriously. They began saving money for her education, looking into schools that might accept female students. If Clara wanted to be a doctor, they would do everything in their power to help her achieve that dream. William, at 10, was quiet and steady, happiest when he was with the animals. He would stay on the ranch. They all knew it. This life suited him in a way it did not suit the others, and Margaret, at 5, was still young enough that her future was a mystery. But Olivia suspected she would be the writer or teacher of the family, the one who dealt in words and ideas rather than physical labor. In 1898, on their 19th wedding anniversary, James surprised Olivia by taking her back to Reno. They had not been back together since they moved to the ranch full-time. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was still standing, though the widow herself had passed away 2 years earlier. The new owner had kept the name, though. They ate dinner at the restaurant where James had taken Olivia on one of their first dates. Many things in Reno had changed, but that restaurant was still there, still claiming to have the best roast chicken in the territory. "You remember the first time we came here?" James asked over their meal. "You were so nervous you barely ate anything." "I was terrified," Olivia admitted. "I kept thinking, what am I doing? I barely know this man, and I am trusting him with my future. And now I cannot imagine my life without you. You are woven into every part of who I am." She reached across the table to take his hand. "Jumping on that train was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do. It was such a grand gesture, so impulsive and romantic. But staying, James, the day-to-day staying, that is what real love is. The choice we make every single day to be together, even when it is hard." "Especially when it is hard," he agreed. "Though I have to say, even the hard days with you are better than the best days were without you." After dinner, they walked to the train station. It looked different now, expanded to accommodate the increasing rail traffic through Nevada. But the platform where James had jumped onto that moving train 20 years ago was still recognizable. "I stood right here," Olivia said, pointing to a spot near the end of the platform. "I was crying, so caught up in my grief that I could barely see straight. And then you appeared like something out of a story, running alongside the train with your hat flying off behind you." James laughed. "I never did find that hat. It was my favorite one, too. It was a small price to pay." "The smallest." He pulled her close, right there on the platform, and kissed her the way he had kissed her on their wedding day, with tenderness and passion and the absolute certainty of their love. A train pulled in and passengers disembarked around them, but they barely noticed. They were lost in their own moment, reliving the choice that had changed everything. As they rode back to the ranch the next day, Olivia thought about time and choices, and the strange, wonderful path her life had taken. If her father had not gotten sick, if she had not been on that particular train, if James had hesitated even a moment longer before jumping, her entire life would have been different. She would be teaching in some stuffy Philadelphia boarding school, unmarried, unloved, safe but unutterably lonely. Instead, she was here. She had a husband who loved her, 4 beautiful children, and a life that was hard and rewarding in equal measure. She had chosen to stay, and that choice had given her everything that mattered. The years continued their march. Thomas married a girl from a neighboring ranch in 1900 and brought her to live on the property while they saved to buy their own land. Clara left for medical school in San Francisco in 1902, one of only 12 women in her class. It was hard to let her go, but Olivia was so proud she felt as if her heart might burst. William took over more and more of the ranch work as James's limp worsened. The old injury had left him with arthritis, and some mornings it was hard for him to walk at all. But he never complained, just adjusted his role to focus on training rather than the physical labor. Margaret finished her schooling and went to work as a teacher in Reno, boarding during the week and coming home on weekends. She was engaged to a young banker, and they planned to marry in the spring of 1905. In 1904, James and Olivia became grandparents when Thomas's wife gave birth to a baby girl. Holding that infant, Olivia marveled at how life circled back on itself. This child was her son's daughter, but also James's granddaughter, a continuation of the love story that had started on a train platform 26 years earlier. "She has your eyes," James said, looking down at the baby. "And your stubborn chin," Olivia replied. They were in their late 40s now, graying and slower but still deeply in love. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, still held hands, still talked about everything and nothing. They had weathered so much together: financial struggles, injuries, the fear of losing children to illness or distance, the slow accumulation of aches and pains that came with age. But they had also experienced so much joy watching their children grow, building a successful ranch, becoming part of a community they loved. On January 12, 1909, their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. Thomas and his wife came with their daughter and new baby son. Clara traveled all the way from San Francisco, where she was now a practicing physician. William, who had married the previous year, came with his pregnant wife, and Margaret came with her husband and their infant daughter. The house that had once been a one-room cabin was now crowded with family, loud with laughter and love. They ate a feast that the women had prepared together, and James gave a toast that made Olivia cry. "30 years ago, I married the bravest woman I have ever known. She had every reason to run away from this hard country, to return to the safe, comfortable life she had left behind. But she stayed. She took a chance on me, on us, on the possibility that something good could come from so much grief. And look at what we have built together." He gestured around the room at their children and grandchildren. "All of this exists because Olivia Jenkins gave me 4 weeks, because she was brave enough to stay." Olivia stood and went to him, kissing him in front of everyone. "All of this exists because you jumped on a train. Because you were brave enough to risk rejection and humiliation for the chance at love. We were brave together, James. That is what made the difference." They danced that night, something they had not done in years. James's limp made him unsteady, but Olivia did not care. They swayed together to the music. Clara was coaxing out of the old piano they had bought years ago, and it was perfect. As the party wound down and the children began settling their little ones for sleep in various corners of the house, James and Olivia stepped outside for air. The stars were brilliant overhead, the sky impossibly vast. "You ever regret it?" Olivia asked. "Not the big things, but the small ones. The life you might have had if you had not tied yourself to me. Never, not for a single instant." James pulled her close. "You are the best decision I ever made." Olivia Everett. "Jumping on that train, asking for those 4 weeks, marrying you, every choice I made that led me to you was exactly right. Even when I burned the dinner, or spent too much on books, or worried myself sick every time one of the children sneezed. Especially then. All of it, every messy, imperfect, beautiful moment of it, I would not trade a single second." They stood there together under the stars, 60 years old and still as in love as they had been at 22 and 26. They had faced hardship and loss, but they had also known joy and triumph. They had built a life that mattered, raised children who were making their own marks on the world, and loved each other through it all. In the spring of 1910, James fell ill. It started as a cough, nothing unusual in a man who had spent most of his life working outdoors in all kinds of weather. But it worsened, settling deep in his chest, and by summer he was spending more time in bed than out of it. Clara came home to care for him, bringing all her medical knowledge to bear. But some things, she told her mother gently, were beyond medicine's reach. James's lungs were simply giving out after 62 years of hard use. Olivia did not leave his side. She held his hand, read to him when he had the strength to listen, and told him stories about their life together. She reminded him of that first train ride, of their picnic in the hills, of the day each of their children were born. She painted their love story for him in words, making sure he knew that every moment had mattered. "I am not afraid," James told her one evening in late August. His voice was weak, but his eyes were clear. "I have lived a good life, Olivia, the best life, all because of you." "You saved me," she said through her tears. "That day on the train, you saved my life, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. You gave me a reason to hope again. We saved each other." He squeezed her hand with what little strength he had. "Promise me you will keep living, Olivia. Do not hide away in grief. You have too much to offer the world." "I promise," she said. "But James, I do not know how to be in this world without you. The same way you did everything else, with courage and love. You will be fine, Olivia. You are the strongest person I know." He died 3 days later quietly, with Olivia holding his hand and their children gathered around the bed. His last words were, "I love you," and then he simply stopped breathing, as if he were falling asleep. The grief nearly broke Olivia. For weeks, she could barely function, moving through her days in a fog of pain. But she had promised James she would keep living, so she did. She got up every morning, tended the ranch with William's help, cared for her grandchildren when they visited. She put one foot in front of the other, even when it felt impossible. Slowly, the sharpest edges of grief wore down into something more bearable. She would never stop missing James, never stop wishing he were beside her. But she learned to live with the loss, to carry it as part of her rather than letting it consume her entirely. She started teaching again, taking on students from the nearby ranches and even from Reno. She found comfort in passing on knowledge and shaping young minds. It gave her purpose during the long days. In the evenings, she sat on the porch James had built and looked out over the land they had claimed together. She could feel him there, in the whisper of the wind through the sagebrush, in the sound of the creek, in the sight of the horses Thomas and William were training using the methods James had taught them. In 1920, when Olivia was 64 years old, she was sitting on that porch when Margaret came to visit with her 3 children. The youngest, a boy of 8, climbed into Olivia's lap and asked her to tell him a story. "What kind of story?" Olivia asked. "A true one. About you and Grandpa James." "Mama says you had a great love story." Olivia smiled and settled the boy more comfortably against her. "We did. Would you like to hear how it started?" "Yes, please." So Olivia told him. She told him about Virginia City and grief and a train platform in 1878. She told him about a cowboy who ran alongside a moving train and jumped on because he could not bear to let her leave without speaking. She told him about 4 weeks that turned into 30 years, about a life built on courage and hope, and the daily choice to love. "That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard," the boy said when she finished, his eyes wide. "It was," Olivia agreed. "But the real romance was not that one grand gesture, though that was certainly important. The real romance was every morning your grandfather woke up and chose me again. Every evening we sat together and talked about our day. Every time we worked through a disagreement or supported each other through hardship. Grand gestures are wonderful, but it is the small, daily acts of love that build a life." Margaret, who had been listening from nearby, came over and kissed her mother's head. "You taught us that, Mama. You and Papa both. You showed us what real love looks like." Olivia lived until 1935, reaching the age of 79. She died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the family she and James had created. At her funeral, Clara read from the letters James had written to Olivia during their courtship, letters Olivia had kept in a box under her bed for over 50 years. "My dearest Olivia," Clara read, her voice thick with emotion. I know I am just a simple cowboy, and you deserve someone more refined, more educated, more worthy of you. But I promise you this. If you give me the chance, I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy. I will work hard, treat you with respect, and love you with everything I have. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, and if you choose me, I will count myself the luckiest man alive. Yours always, James. That is who they were, Clara said, looking out at the assembled crowd: children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, friends, and neighbors. Two people who chose each other every single day for more than 30 years. They built this ranch, this family, this legacy, from nothing but love and determination. We are all here because Mama was brave enough to get off a train in Reno, and Papa was brave enough to jump on it in the first place. They buried Olivia next to James on a hillside overlooking the ranch. The headstone was simple. Olivia Jenkins Everett, 1856–1935. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and teacher. She chose to stay. The ranch remained in the family for generations after that. Thomas's sons and William's daughters and Margaret's grandchildren all spent time there, learning to ride horses and tend cattle and appreciate the hard, beautiful country that had given their ancestors so much. And every so often, someone would ask about the two graves on the hillside, and someone else would tell the story. The story of a grieving woman on a train and a desperate cowboy who jumped aboard to ask her to stay. The story of 4 weeks that changed 2 lives and created a legacy that lasted far beyond them. It was a story about courage and hope, about taking risks for love, about the daily choice to build a life together. It was, in the end, exactly the kind of story that deserved to be told and retold, passed down through the generations as a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is jump on a moving train and say, "Don't leave without hearing this." Because you never know. That one moment of courage might just change everything.